You are referring to all evidence introduced at the time of the grand jury hearing, is that correct? Let's see. On behalf of Atkinson, all evidence excluding the evidence having to do with count 8 of the indictment. On behalf of Cassidy, Your Honor, all evidence including that contained in count 8 of the indictment. Fine, Your Honor. The people have an affidavit in support of a petition for search warrant and a return on said search warrant number 79411. We would like it marked People's Exhibit 15, and I request that number so we may have some continuity in numbers. Marked what? 15. Be received on this motion and marked People's 15. It already bears the tag, Your Honor. I am handing it to the bailiff. I would like to add to the indicated evidence that I wish to suppress in that it is not only all evidence presented to the grand jury, but all evidence within the allegations of count 1, 4, and 6 of the indictment on file herein, and also in addition, including count 8 for the defendant Cassidy, Your Honor. Very well, the record will so show. And at this time, before we proceed, I would like to, for the record, indicate that our motive was made pursuant to 7893.9 of the State Penal Code and is made for 7892M3 as may be applicable for the purpose of traversing the warrant in this case. Very well, the record will so show. Are we ready to go? The people have nothing further at this time. At this time, Your Honor, I would move to exclude all witnesses. Any objection? No objection. Save one officer who is my investigating officer and who has been with me throughout this case, and that is Detective Edward Madigan, M-A-D-I-G-A-N, Wyoming State Police, Laramie Substation, who is seated to my left at the council table. Motion is granted. You may have your investigating officer stay. All witnesses in the case are to remain outside the courtroom. Do not discuss your testimony before or after being called as a witness. I will call Officer Winchell if he is present. You do solemnly swear the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God? I do. Please be seated at the stand and state your full name for the record. Andrew I. Winchell, W-I-N-C-H-E-L-L. Officer Winchell, on January 18, 1990, what was your business or occupation? I was a deputy sheriff employed by the state of Wyoming then and there at that time, assigned to the plainclothes detail. And on that date, on January 18, 1990, did you have occasion to go to 1030 Flowerdale Road? Yes, ma'am, I did. Were you in possession of any information before you went to 1030 Flowerdale Road that would indicate to you any unlawful activity taking place at that location? I am referring to your first visit that day, not specifically, no ma'am. And did you know Carl Atkinson prior to going to 1030 Flowerdale Road on January 19, 1990? Yes ma'am. How long had you known Mr. Atkinson? I would say approximately 7 or 8 years. And did you know him in a professional capacity? I withdraw that question. Did you consider Mr. Atkinson a friend of yours on that day? Well, that is a hard question to answer with a yes or no. I would have to qualify my answer with the court's permission. All right, I have arrested Mr. Atkinson in the past for other violations. I consider Mr. Atkinson a friend. Now, there has been no animosity as far as Mr. Atkinson and I were concerned. We were on friendly terms to discuss different things. People versus Atkinson. Mr. Atkinson is in the hall, Your Honor. Mrs. Delaney, I believe, has not arrived as yet. The people are ready, Your Honor. Are you ready on Atkinson? Yes, Your Honor. I am sorry. I left at 7:45. And very well, we will proceed. Will you state your appearances for the record? Christina Delaney appearing for Carl Atkinson, who is present in court. Wayne B. Phillips appearing for the people who are ready. Very well, proceed. Your Honor, before we commence the motion under section 789.9, I would like to have counsel specify the evidence she seeks to suppress. That is contained in counts 1, 4, and 7 in the complaint on file herein. Are you referring to the indictment, ma'am? Yes, that's right. And you are referring to all evidence introduced at the time of the grand jury hearing. Is that right? Let's see. On behalf of Atkinson, all evidence excluding that evidence having to do with count 8 of the indictment. On behalf of Cassidy, Your Honor, all evidence including that contained in count 8 of the indictment. Fine, Your Honor. The people have an affidavit in support of a petition for search warrant and a return on said search warrant number 79411. We would like it marked People's Exhibit 15, and I request that number so we may have some continuity in numbers. Marked what? 15. Be received on this motion and marked People's 15. It already bears the tag, Your Honor. I am handing it to the bailiff. I would like to add to the indicated evidence that I wish to suppress in that it is not only all evidence presented to the grand jury, but all evidence within the allegations of count 1, 4, and 6 of the indictment on file herein, and also in addition including count 8 for the defendant Cassidy, Your Honor. Very well, the record will so show. And at this time, before we proceed, I would like to, for the record, indicate that our motion was made pursuant to 7893.9 of the State Penal Code and is made for 7892 and 3, and may be applicable for the purpose of traversing the warrant in this case. Very well, and the record will so show. Are we ready to go? And the people have nothing further at this time. At this time, Your Honor, I would move to exclude all witnesses. Any objection? No objection, save one officer who is my investigating officer and who has been with me throughout this case, and that is Detective Edward Madigan, M-A-D-I-G-A-N, Wyoming State Police, Laramie Substation, who is seated to my left at the council table. Motion is granted. You may have your investigating officer stay. All witnesses in the case are to remain outside the courtroom. Do not discuss your testimony before or after being called as a witness. I will call Officer Winchell if he is present. You do solemnly swear the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Be seated at the stand and state your full name for the record. Andrew I. Winchell, W-I-N-C-H-E-L-L. Officer Winchell, on January 19, 1990, what was your business or occupation? I was a deputy sheriff employed by the state of Wyoming, then and there at that time assigned to the plainclothes detail. And on that date, on January 18, 1990, did you have occasion to go to 1030 Flowerdale Road? Yes, ma'am, I did. Were you in possession of any information before you went to 1030 Flowerdale Road that would indicate to you any unlawful activity taking place at that location? I am referring to your first visit that day, not specifically, no ma'am. And did you know Carl Atkinson prior to going to 1030 Flowerdale Road on January 19, 1990? Yes, ma'am. And how long have you known Mr. Atkinson? I would say approximately 7 or 8 years. And did you know him in a professional capacity? I withdraw that question. Did you consider Mr. Atkinson a friend of yours on that day? Well, that is a hard question to answer with a yes or no answer. I would have to qualify my answer with the court's permission. All right. I have arrested Mr. Atkinson in the past for other violations. I consider Mr. Atkinson a friend. There has been no animosity as far as Mr. Atkinson and I were concerned. We were on friendly terms to discuss different things. All right, 225 for voice for 5 minutes. Starts with question by defense, direct examination by defense. Ready? Now, when Mr. Plum was on the roof by his home or on top of the roof of his home, could you tell me, could you see, how was the lighting condition? Oh, it is right by a lamp post. A lamp post is on that corner. Now, the lamp post was real bright, yeah. So you could see him well? Yes, I could. Now, what if anything was he doing with his hands? Well, he was holding his hands up. How? Would you demonstrate? Well, you know, like that. All right. Indicating the same position as the other witnesses have indicated. Now, and did you hear him say anything? I heard him before he had, you know, while his hands were held up, what if anything did he say? He said he give up, you know, he was ready to come down. And then what happened? Well, he was felled by a bullet and he fell down. He fell down, yeah, just at that second you could see officers, I don't know how they got up there, but they was coming from behind him. Which way was he facing? He was facing towards, his face was towards the Duncan Street way, you know. Facing Duncan Street? Yeah, facing Duncan. And did he ever turn around while his hands were up? No. What, if anything, did he have in his hands? Did he have any weapon? I didn't see him with anything the whole time. Nothing at all? Nothing. Did he throw anything off the roof? No, not at the time I was there. I didn't see him throw anything. The whole time you were there, did you ever see him throw anything off the roof? No, I didn't. And you say that you had observed him from the time he switched over the roofs? Yes, I did. And then he got onto the roof of his own house? Yes. Was he in full sight at that time? From the time that I seen him, he was. I say, was he in your full sight? Yes, he was. All the time he was on the roof, on top of this house? Yes. You could see the officers coming up on the roof in back of him. When I seen the police coming from in the back of him, he had fell down. I didn't see them when they climbed up there or anything like that. Your witness, as a matter of fact, Mr. Hill, from your vantage point, you couldn't actually tell whether Mr. Plum began to turn around as he was shot or not. Isn't that right, sir? Would you repeat that again? From where you were standing, you couldn't actually tell precisely the movements of Mr. Plum. That is whether or not he began to turn around with his hand in his pocket at the moment he was shot. Could you see that precisely and positively? Yes, I could. Were you in a better position to see than someone who in fact was not more than 10 feet from the defendant and climbing up on the roof of the building? Objection. How could he tell? Sustained. Now, you are approximately how far up the street, sir, on Duncan? I will say about from anywhere from 6 to 7 doors on the other side of the street. 6 or 7 doors up this way. That would put you somewhere over here, about middle ways. About here? Yes, sir. Okay. And he was shot, as you say, by an officer who was in fact right at the house and coming up through the back? No, I didn't say that. I said that I didn't know from which view he was shot from, but I say the second he was shot, that I could see officers coming from behind them. Right. They may have been there the whole time, to your knowledge. You really don't know one way or the other? No, I don't know. Right. Now, in the beginning, you described an incident where Mr. Hunt was chasing Mr. Plum and his wife down the alley, and you mentioned you thought Mr. Hunt had a gun in his hand at that time. I didn't think. I seen it. And did he fire it? Not at the time I seen him. He did not? No, he did not. And then you returned home at that time, and you did not hear any shots at that time. Isn't that correct, sir? I returned to my mother's house. To your mother's house? Yes. And you didn't hear any shots after that? Not after that. And in fact, it was sometime later when you ultimately saw Mr. Plum up on the roof, and that's when you heard all those shots and all that commotion a little later. Right. And Mr. Plum was running across these roofs, and you say hopping from one roof to another. Do you mean hopping across this alley that when he hopped from across 2 alleys? He hopped across 2 alleys? Yes, it is a small alley. In other words, there is a small one up here. Is this what you are describing? Yes. So he actually hopped 2 alleys and onto this roof? Yeah. What words exactly was Mr. Plum using when you say he was in a position on this roof attempting to surrender? Exact words? Yes. Can you recall? Not exactly, not exactly. I heard him, I do remember the part when he said that he gives up. He said, I give up. Now, you were standing some distance away. Yes, he says he is coming down. I remember those 2 statements. He said he is coming down. Could it be, I am coming down to get you, you MF policeman? No, I didn't hear that. And did you hear anything else from his mouth at that time? He said, he hollered before that little incident. Now that part had happened. He hollered for his, he said, Aunt Mill, let me in. Now that is his Aunt Mildred who lives at that house here? Yes, she does. Now, at this time, were any shots being fired while this hollering was going on? There were shots being fired. Is it quite possible that the defendant could have said something else that you did not hear? Objection. How could he know that? I will sustain the objection. Did you hear anything else from his mouth that you couldn't understand? Did I hear anything else come from his mouth? Yes. No, I didn't. $204 voice, 15 minutes. Did you hear anything else from his mouth that you couldn't understand? Did I hear anything else come from his mouth? Yes. No, I didn't. You didn't hear anything else? How well do you know the defendant in this case? Oh, I have known him casually. I sort of know him through my brother. Through your brother? Uh-huh. Your brother is a friend of his? Yes, friends. And his name is Kelvin Hill? Yes. But you have had some contact with Mr. Plum here every once in a while. Right. Mr. Hill, were you born in 1949? No, I was born in 1944. 1944. January 2nd? Yes. And in October of this year, were you convicted of assault? Were you not, sir? Assault? Yes. Yes, I have been convicted of assault, with, as far as my wife is concerned, about 3 or 4 times. All right. I have no further questions of this witness. No questions. I would like to say something. Go ahead. After the incident was all over and the ambulance and everything had left, you could still hear shots being fired on the alleyway in Baltimore Street. Do you know by whom? No, I don't. Could it have been another entirely unrelated incident? It could have been. No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill, Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill, do not discuss anything about this case with anyone until the case has been concluded. Yes, sir. You understand me? Yes, sir. All right. Thank you. I will now call Kelvin Hill. State your name and address. Kelvin Hill, 19 South Duncan Street. Now, Mr. Hill, I want you to, if you are chewing gum, would you take it out of your mouth? No, I am not. I'm sorry. You live at 19 South Duncan Street? Yes, I do. Now, I want you to speak right into the microphone and speak as clearly as you can so His Honor and the ladies and gentlemen of the jury can hear what you have to say. All right. As well as the state's attorney and myself. Okay. Thank you. I want to direct your attention to May 24, 1969 in the early morning hours and ask if you happened to be in the vicinity of Duncan and Lombard Streets that night. Yes, I was. All right. Now, did anything unusual occur there? Yes, sir. All right, fine. Now, I want you to tell His Honor, the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, just exactly what happened, what you saw, and what you heard. Well, I was in the house and talking to the microphone so we can hear you. We were all in the house, me and a couple of friends of mine. Whose house? My house. And we heard 2 shotgun blasts that sounded like they came from over the back houses of Baltimore Street. And about 10 minutes later, here come the police, and I looked out my door, and I heard them shooting, and then I saw one that came down beside my steps and was kneeling down beside my steps. You said about 10 seconds later, the police came, and you say you saw somebody shooting. Who was doing the shooting? The police were, How many policemen were there? Well, first there was just about 3 or 4, and then the cars just started pouring in. Now, at this point, where were you standing? In my doorway. You were in your doorway at 19 South Duncan Street, which is, can you see this map? This is Duncan Street, Lombard Street, Baltimore Street. I am going to start at Baltimore Street and go in the unit block south. And I want you to stop me when my pin hits near where your house sits, right here. Back up right where the end is on Duncan Street. Right here, that is my house. All right. How many policemen were doing the shooting? Well, at first I only saw about 3 or 4 shooting. One was at my step shooting. The other one was 3 houses up and on the other side of the street behind the light pole shooting. And about 2 doors down the street, the other one was shooting. And then all the rest of them filed in and was shooting. The policemen, where were they shooting? They were shooting at the garage directly in front of my house across the street. And then they were shooting at the house next to the garage and then straight on down. All right. Now, I want to ask you what happened after you saw the policemen shooting. What else did you see? Well, I saw somebody on the roof that they were shooting at. Could you tell who that was? That was Ronald Plum. Where was he? Well, you say he was on a roof. He was on the garage roof at first, and they were shooting at him. And he climbed up on the roof next to the garage. Then there is a little alley about 2 foot wide between that house and the next house, and he jumped over there, and they were still shooting. Still shooting there, And then I thought I saw him fall, but I couldn't be sure. And the next thing I knew, they were shooting at the roof on the other side of the next alley, which was about 9 foot wide. So he was initially in this area when you saw him, not at first. Now to orient you, this is where Ronald Plum's house. Let him answer the question. He said, not at first, I'm sorry. When they first started shooting, they were across the street from my house. When the police first started shooting, they were across the street from your house, which is here. Where did you first see Mr. Plum? On the roof, the garage roof across from me. The garage roof? Where is that? That's about right there, right in here. That is the first place you saw him. Back up a little bit. Right about there. Right about in here. Now this is a garage roof. How far off of the ground is it? About 11 foot. Now how clearly could you see Mr. Plum at this point? Pretty clearly I could see him. Did you have an opportunity at this point up in here to observe his hands? Yes, sir, when he was going up to the next roof. What, if anything, did he have in his hands? Nothing, nothing, nothing that I could see. I saw both hands and he didn't have nothing in them as far as I could see. All right. Then which way did he go then? He went up on the roof and like I say, he was here and he climbed up. He started which way? This way? No, towards Lombard. This way? He climbed up on another roof. Right. And that's where he either stumbled or was shot. I don't know which. Up here? Yes. And then what happened? And then the next time I seen him, he was on the other side of the alley. Over here? And that is the little 2-foot alley. No, this is about 9 foot. The 2-foot alley isn't even on that map. I don't see it. Well, I want to point out, can you see this map clearly? Oh yes, that would be the 2-foot alley. This one down here, I want to point out for the record that there has been drawn in here a small alley or areaway, which has been described as a small areaway used to allow people to go from one house to another in between a block of row of houses. All right. And just south of here, there is located a no-name alley, which is just north of Mr. Plum's address, which is the roof over his house. And you say this is the alley which he jumped. This one here, I suppose. I didn't see him jump it. Oh, you didn't see him? No. Now, there came a time when you said you saw him on this roof. That's right. Now, what were the lighting conditions? Well, right there at the corner of the roof and the alley, there is a big light pole, and you can see everything clearly. Could you see him clearly? What was he doing? Well, at first he was ducking down behind the pole, and the police were still shooting, and it is like a little skylight up there that goes down into his aunt's kitchen, and he was banging on the skylight, calling his aunt's name. And the skylight, nobody answered the skylight, and so the next thing I saw, Butch was standing up, and he said he was coming down, and he was hollering down to the police that he was coming down, and he had his hands up that he was coming down. How did he have his hands? He had his hands up like this, you know. Well, could you demonstrate for the jury? He just had his hands up, counsel. He had his hands up. He wasn't straight. He was kind of crouched. He had his hands up and he hollered down at them that he was coming down. Well, they hadn't stopped firing, but then when everybody who hadn't stopped firing, the police hadn't stopped firing yet. Were you able to see his hands? What, if anything, at that point did he have in his hands? Nothing. Then the police down on the ground, after all the people were in the alley, was hollering at them that he was coming down, and mostly all of them stopped firing, and then it was quiet for a few seconds, and then we heard 2 more shots and Butch went down. Now that was about it until then everybody was gathered around. Now the police was keeping everybody back. So after it was all over, we went around to tell Butch's brother-in-law what had happened, my brother and I. And we went through this alley on Duncan. Objection. If Your Honor, please, I don't think this is in response to the question. Well, I want to ask. I will ask the question again. What happened after Butch was brought down? Well, He laid there up on the roof quite a while before the ambulance got there. And after the ambulance took Butch away, then I went out in the back to see about my dog, and the police was in the back of my house, the next door to me. Now, again, you say that your house was right here. Now, where the police were after this occurred was where? In the alley in the back. Back in here, next to my house. Back in this alley, yes. Indicating for the record, an alley also without a name running parallel to Duncan Street immediately to the east. And in the alley, where were they with relation to your door? Were they north or to the south? To the south. Right in here to the south. That's where the investigation squad was, right in here. What were they doing? Well, they seemed to be checking around in the back alley. And one policeman called the other one over and was showing him spent cartridges. Spent cartridges, and these spent cartridges were taken from this backyard back here? Yes, sir. Do you know anything about these cartridges? No, sir, except for when I got home from work the day before that I heard that there had been some shooting out there in that alley. I don't know what it was all about. The police never came around about it or anything. The day before? Yes, sir. Have you ever seen anybody shooting in back there? No, sir. Well, objection. If Your Honor, please, we are talking about the night in question. I will overrule it. I think it is pertinent to the case, Your Honor. I will overrule the objection. You may answer. Have you ever seen anybody shooting in back there? No, sir. After objection, if Your Honor, please. And then what happened after going back into the house? Excuse me, Mr. Hill, you have to wait until he asks you a question. I am asking him. Now, you already described that you saw there were some police officers who gathered some spent shells all the way in the back of that alley? Yes, sir. And that was immediately to the south of where you live? Yes, sir. All right. Then what happened? What did you observe? I went back in the front and I got my brother and we were sitting on the steps. So somebody said we should go around and tell Ronald's brother-in-law what had happened. So we went up Duncan Street and through this last alley before you hit Baltimore Street going west. Right. And his brother-in-law's house, that is on Chester Street. So we was in there about 10, maybe 15 minutes talking to him, telling him what had happened. So after we finished talking to him, we started back through the alley and the same shotgun blasts we heard before, we heard them again from the porches on the back of Baltimore Street. So you heard shotgun blasts after all this was over? Yes. The same shotgun blast which you had heard, objection, if Your Honor, please, which you had heard in the beginning. Is that right? Yes, sir. Objection, if Your Honor, please, the witness has already been over this. All right. And so after we come on back around, and I sat on the steps for about another half hour and then went to bed. All right. And that is what happened that night? Yes, sir. I have no further questions. These shotgun blasts that you described, Mr. Hill, they were very loud, were they not, sir? Yes, sir. And this is about 15 minutes after this incident had occurred on the roof here.